artificial intelligence is remaking marketing as we speak. And if you're a marketer, you can either get up to speed or get left behind. The choice is yours, and really it's a no-brainer. Join Geoff Livingston and Greg Verdino as they explore the latest AI news, trends, tools, and ideas that are creating the future of marketing today. This is No Brainer, an AI podcast for marketers. Take it away, Geoff and Greg.
Hey everybody, it's Geoff Livingston. My companion in crime, Mr. Greg Verdino, is off to keynote a conference, so you'll have to bear with me solo. Before I introduce our fantastic guest today, who is Andre Yee, founder of Tiga AI, I'd like to give a few shout outs to folks, particularly our sponsors. I do want to thank the Marketing Podcast Network for having us as part of their team. We definitely want to thank you, our listeners or viewers, if you're watching on YouTube. Please be sure to smash that like button after you get this episode. Share it to your friends. We love reviews. And please do not hesitate. Email us, DM us, tell us what you think, give us ideas, tell us what you want to see on the show. We're definitely interested in making that happen. And so with that, let's just get right to it. We have a really awesome guest today. His name again is Andre Yee. He was a senior vice president of product at Eloqua. After leaving Eloqua, and I believe that was after their successful acquisition, Andre started another company, which is an account-based marketing company called Triblio, which was acquired by IDG. Now, Andre's back at it again, starting another fantastic company. This time, of course, it is an AI company. And with that, let me introduce Andre Yee, founder, CEO of Tiga AI. Andre, how are you, my man?
I am doing well. And thank you for having me on your podcast. The fact that your podcast has sponsors, I mean, that is impressive for me. Like you.
You're very kind. I would say the Marketing Podcast Network has sponsors, but we gladly dip our fingers in that water.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you.
For sure. Although, folks, if you want to sponsor, just reach out. We're always open.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Andre, you and I were talking about this whole AI revolution almost as soon as GPT launched a year and a half ago. And we've had several conversations privately. So maybe like the best way to start is just have a general overall conversation about how do you think the emergence of generative AI is impacting sales and marketing? Do you want to add any quick thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of quick thoughts. First of all, I think generative AI is an impact event for sales and marketing. And what I mean by that is that I think the dust is still settling on how to best leverage this technology for sales and marketing. And I think it'll take a while for the dust to settle. But I do think that at the end of it, the organizations that figure it out are not just going to be like 20, 30% better. They're going to be 2x, 3x better. So I think the impact is huge from my perspective. And I think that marketers and sales teams, but in particular, I think marketers are actually leading the way in the adoption of AI, generative AI in the enterprise, in businesses. Because I recently saw a study by McKinsey, and the use of generative AI, about 65% of all organizations have at least one business function using generative AI. Above and beyond that, when you break down the stats, you'll see that it's sales and marketing leading the way, with about a third of the respondents saying it's their sales and marketing team that are using the AI. So really, doesn't surprise me, but marketing, sales teams are sort of leading this use of AI.
Yeah, I like how you phrased it as an impact event, because it was kind of like a meteor hit the earth. Exactly. Almost the way ChatGPT just blew out. And then all of a sudden we were all forced to reckon with this. And,
exactly.
And I do think like last year was a head scratching, like, oh my gosh, what do we do moment. It's interesting that you say that sales and marketing are leading. How much of that do you think is personal productivity tools, like people just using writers or image generators, versus really getting into some, shall we say, deep AI solutions that affect holistic processes?
Yeah, so I think just along those lines, Glassdoor released a survey at the start of this year. It said 77% of marketers have used ChatGPT.
Right.
So a lot of the use of generative AI for marketing and sales teams are around ChatGPT and other AI chatbots like that, right? So that I think, and the use cases that they're using it for are typically content generation, right? Content creation, sparking ideas for content, creating drafts of blog posts and all that kind of stuff. That's very clearly one of the primary, if not the primary use case for marketing teams. But I think you're alluding to something really interesting, which is that one thing that we haven't seen yet is sort of having this generative AI capability deeply embedded into the workflow, into the role, into the day-to-day role of a salesperson, day-to-day role of a marketing person, where it's centrally part of how they work, right? So I think that's the next wave of where this goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a little bit of a, I don't want to say I'm a skeptic because I definitely believe in AI and I know you know this, but I am a skeptic of hype. And I wouldn't say I'm so far down the road as Gary Marcus is because he just seems to live to take his BB gun out and shoot it at OpenAI. But I feel like that a lot of people talk about using AI in marketing, but when they get down to brass tacks, their data's a mess. They may be using it to correct things. And then when you really look under the covers, they're really still trying to figure out how to make it what I would call a seismic, to your analogy, impact event for marketing where it really moves the needle rather than boosting an individual's ability to jack out maybe 7 posts instead of 4 posts in a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think you and I have spoken before, and I'm often fond of saying ChatGPT is the Excel spreadsheet for generative AI.
Yes, I love that.
And the reason I said that, by the way, is that it's a really good way to think about what ChatGPT is doing. It's a great introduction to the power of generative AI, meaning like it's a general purpose tool. You can use Excel back in the days if you're old enough to know when Excel was first introduced. You use it for everything. You can use it for your home finances. You can use it to plan your vacation. You can use it to track bugs for your software tracking. You can use it to run your business. That's what some people still do. But I think what you found was that it was really great, really, really powerful. It was a horizontal tool. But eventually what happened was there was this next generation of purpose-built tools that came along for a particular function or for a particular role. And that's when you saw the huge productivity gains, right? So I think the same thing will happen with generative AI. I think you're seeing ChatGPT sort of making people aware of the power, and we continue to be astounded by not only ChatGPT, but other developments like that. But the real productivity gains for businesses will come when they're purpose-built AIs for sales, purpose-built AIs for the account executive, purpose-built AIs for the content marketer, and so forth. So,
yeah. I definitely see that. And I know that one of the things that you really focus on is the SDR side of it and how it's going to be impacting account executives and really that movement to make them a little more effective. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how that works, because I think a lot of people that are not in sales don't really understand what an SDR does to develop those leads and build out the research and supply whoever their primary touch guy or touch gal or touch person may be, and really enable them to go out there and be successful. How do you see AI impacting that SDR role?
Yeah, first of all, I think the way the SDR role has been defined in the past decade, it's not what sales development was really originally all about, right? I think one of the things that you're seeing happen in the industry is with the sort of era of cheap capital going away, this idea of hiring an army of SDRs, slamming the phones indiscriminately, blasting up.
You ever see the movie Boiler Room? Doesn't it feel like, you ever see the movie Boiler Room where they're like,
yeah.
It's like Boiler Room, right? They're just calling people like, oh, we got a lead, Joe.
Yeah, exactly. So that and just blasting thousands of emails a week, that era of just hiring an army and just doing that, first of all, I think is not where things are going, because that approach, that outbound model doesn't work anymore by and large. You can still make it work in certain circumstances, but it doesn't work anymore. So here's what's interesting. What does work, right? We should be asking our question, what does work? When you talk to a lot of top sellers, whether they're strategic BDRs or whether they're account executives, what you start to see is that there's a pattern to what they do, and it involves research. They know the accounts they're reaching out to. They know the buyers in the accounts. It involves relational connection. They try to connect with the buyer, get in front of them. In the old days when you only had physical events to go to, you try to be at the same place, but now it's LinkedIn or it's Twitter or whatever. And then thirdly, they have what I would call insight-based interactions, meaning they interact, they reach out on the basis of buyer signals, buyer behaviors. They look for different signals and behaviors that are pertinent, and they reach out on that basis, right? So it's along those lines. And I think what Tiga is all about is how do we help people do that kind of prospecting, not the old way of prospecting, right? So what I'm saying is whether you're an SDR or an AE, the future of prospecting for you looks like that. It doesn't look like blasting 1,000 emails out a day. And that's what we're trying to help people do.
Well, I'm putting my hand up as a business owner to be one of your first beta guinea pigs. Please help.
Yes, we'll get you guys going.
So that's pretty cool. I mean, that sounds innately human, right? So you're using AI to empower humans in a way, which is kind of like an undercurrent of the adoption movement generally, right?
Yeah, I think there's so much talk in the press and the mainstream of what people are talking about, so much talk about AI replacing humans. The way we think about it, and sometimes we talk about ourselves this way, we're about amplifying human selling, right? That's our mission. We want to amplify human-centric selling is the way we talk about it. And what we mean by that is a couple of things. One, we think that there is a kind of selling in B2B that will be human, that is human to human and will be for quite a while. That's not changing in the next 10 to 15 years. Secondly, I think the real challenge for us in the use of AI is not about replacing humans. It's about how do you amplify the human seller? How do you amplify the human marketer? Because the choice between having a smaller team or keeping the team the same size, that's a business decision that the business owner or the CEO is going to make. But what our mission is, how do we make each seller fire? How do we make the marketer more effective because they're running campaigns based on signals and not just cold campaigns, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah. I've heard some people say that they imagine a lot of SDRs being replaced, right? Do you see that happening, or is that because that old model that we were talking about, that dial for dollars model, if you would, just really isn't relevant anymore and people aren't investing in that? And instead, it really is about becoming more of that relational researcher.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's one that we don't like to wrestle with because we're talking about
it's my job, Andre. Tough questions, man.
No, because these are people with real jobs, right? Like you don't want to say, hey, but I think here's the reality. I did say it's an impact event for sales, and I think it'll take a couple of years for this whole thing to get figured out. But here's what I think it'll look like in the future. I think there will still be SDRs. There'll just be fewer of them because hiring an army isn't as necessary anymore. You just need fewer of them, and they're probably going to be deployed as an assist to your account executive, the enterprise account executive targeting some really large accounts. That's what I think.
That makes sense in a professional services environment, right?
Yeah,
so that makes
exactly.
A ton of sense.
Exactly. And then the second thing I think is that even when they do exist, they're not going to prospect in the same way as they did before. So they're going to prospect more like what you see the top AEs do, which is research, relationally connect, insight-based interactions, right? So I think that's the model. Our thesis is that's going to be the model in the future. There's no way avoiding it. Some people would even say that's the model today. That's the thing. And then the third thing, you didn't ask this, but I think another outcome of this is we're going to see more full cycle, what's known as full cycle account executives, meaning account executives that actually have to prospect for their pipeline. Can you imagine that?
Imagine that, building your own relationship. So my Lord.
Exactly. How novel.
Right. Well, that makes sense. I mean, people like to do business with people they enjoy their company or trust them, or both. Another topic you and I have talked about in the past is how the CMO role is really changing with the CCO now taking over that role in some cases and just having a VP or a director of marketing. And then the whole MarTech stack seems to be, at least this is what Greg and I are experiencing, and I think we talked about this in our pre-show chat. Like when we talk with the CMO or the head of marketing or even the chief commercial officer, they're deferring to the CTO for the MarTech stack, at least with AI.
Yeah.
Curious for your take and your experience on that. I definitely have a few thoughts, but I don't want to lead the witness.
Anything I'm sharing is just anecdotal, but I'll go back in 2013 or so, 2014. I think there was a Gartner study, and they weren't the only ones that said something like, in the next 5 years, by 2018, and I may be slightly misquoting, but the CMO will spend more on IT than the CIO. And it was almost like the CMO, like puffing the chest out and sort of like beating the chest and saying, I'm a player here. But as you might think from the CIO's point of view, those are fighting words.
Fast.
Those are fighting words, And I think what you've seen is that the CIO has, in the age of privacy, in the age of AI, the CIO and someone who's more technical is starting to sort of, they're getting their hands back over the control of IT spend, right? I think that's just anecdotal, but I've seen it. And then you mentioned something that I think is really interesting, the rise of the chief commercial officer or the rise of a CRO that also oversees marketing.
Right, which is the old VP of sales and marketing.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I've seen that. It's just anecdotal, but I've seen it increase as well, right? And then this is not something you asked, but I would also say what's interesting is that among marketing leaders, there's a rebirth of the value of brand. Right. So, if you ask me what are some of the big things that I've seen in the role of the CMO, I think now there are more and more job descriptions out there that say, I'm looking for a CMO. Yes, everyone can generate demand or know how to use the tools, but I'm looking for someone that knows how to build a brand. Yeah. And so in a way, it's like everything that's old is new again, right? Like that used to be what marketing was all about.
Does that mean the Reese family is going to make a comeback and start selling the proposition? I guess they call it the origin of brands at the end, but the value prop is going to come back, the USP.
Yeah. Who knows?
I have a theory about this movement. So let me run it by you. You could tell me whether I'm off my rocker, and you wouldn't be the first person today to say that. I think one of the movements that we saw with CMOs over the past decade was that they are the home of data analytics for the customer journey, right? And one of the more powerful elements of AI is not generative, it's actually ML. And now we're starting to see this movement towards unifying the CDP, customer data, and making sure that we have all that information in one place, in large part to feed AI, but also so that we can start really unleashing strong analytics engines on that. Call it ML, call it what you want. But now we have basically solutions that are better than the CMO. And we're seeing a lot of pieces of that funnel kind of come into the light. And I know this is a Trivial thing where you guys really focused on middle content and really the whole life cycle. I just feel like so many marketers still rely on first touch, last touch. I mean, they're stuck in that old world and they're being exposed. And I feel like some of this movement's happening because of that antiquated point of view with data.
It could be because of that. You may be right. My own personal belief is that when people think about demand gen, they think about the same stack. It used to be, hey, I need someone that knows how to do demand gen, knows how to build lead scoring system. And that used to be a rare skill. Back when I was with Eloqua, it was rare. I mean, there were agencies built on specializing on just that, helping you deploy marketing automation, building a system of record, helping you build your ICP. And that work is still happening and important today. But what I guess I'm saying is that is much more common knowledge today than it was, 15 years ago. And I think what is mysterious and difficult is that's great. I can find a VP of marketing that knows how to put demand gen programs in, but how do I find someone that makes my brand stand out?
Right.
How do I find someone that understands how to position us in the market so that we look different, sound bigger, and more meaningful to the buyer, to the customer, right? Those are things that people wrestle with. And those are not simple answers to that, right? It's not like, oh, just go buy this MarTech platform. Your brand issues will be fixed. It doesn't work that way.
Put it in ChatGPT, see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I think, yeah, it's really going to be an interesting time. I do see that rise of creative excellence coming back. I love that this conversation is focusing on that. Let's talk a little bit about that go-to-market movement, though, and how things are moving on with the low interest rates and cheap capital being gone and the implications of that. Where do you see a marketing department in 5 years with all these technologies and tools coming in? Where do you see all this stuff really kind of impacting the organization as we move forward? Like, how do you see processes evolving? Where do you really see the strategist CMO playing?
Well, I think, first of all, if you think about sort of the application ecosystem, you have to say that if you believe in AI, and I know you have an allergic reaction to hype, but I personally believe that in every major functional area, if generative AI reaches the full potential that we think it can have, I think that a lot of your existing sort of ecosystem of applications will be radically changed. Now, some of that means there will be incumbents that are moving that have a vision and they really act like startups and they can really innovate. But there are going to be incumbents that are going to be displaced because they're slow and they're adding AI in the margins, but they're not fundamentally changing the workflow and disrupting how people work. I think that you're going to see that, right? Like, there's a belief sometimes, and I think it's not entirely true. There's a belief that incumbents have this moat of data, and so they'll never be displaced. And well, in ML, that reinforcement learning, having a lot of data actually matters. In generative AI, it's less important. In fact, someone said to me recently, even the notion of, I think it's pretty much common belief now that for most companies, it's pointless to build your own models. Right, you should be taking an existing model and you should be fine tuning it. And then someone said to me recently, I'm not even sure you should fine tune it. It may not even be worthwhile unless you're trying to fine tune it for very specific tasks, because general purpose tasks are sort of, the models are just getting better and better. So all that is a very long-winded way of saying, in terms of the application ecosystem, I think there is a fallacy out there, and maybe some of the incumbents believe that they have a huge advantage because of the data that they have access to. That's not the case in generative AI. It's not the moat that it was in sort of reinforcement learning, machine learning.
I think that's a really good point. Like, when you look at the players that are incumbents that are moving, it's Google, it's Microsoft. When you look at the incumbents that are kind of sitting and maybe hedging bets, I mean, Amazon, I know it's shocking to even say that Amazon might be behind in generative, but they're just investing, right? They're hosting it. They're making money off of it, hand over fist. They're enabling their stores on the Amazon marketplace, but they're really not, they're not engaging on that Copilot 365 level or that Gemini search level. I mean, I'm not saying Gemini search is good, but I am saying at least Google's taking swings, right? Yeah. And then the other one that really comes to mind that could be a platform player that's maybe ripe for being displaced if they don't make themselves move in the next couple of years is probably Apple. I just don't see them doing a lot right now. And traditionally they are the last mover, but when they move, they tend to move better than everybody else, but we'll see.
I think all the names that you talked about are they're behemoth companies, right? A lot of them spanning both consumer and business. I don't think you have to look too far to, I don't know if you follow the stock market, but last week, like, Salesforce stock got hammered. They downgraded their guidance for it. But one of the reasons it got hammered, if I'm not mistaken, is that some of the analysts are just concerned they don't have this well-crafted AI strategy, right? And
they just bolt on GPT, right?
Yeah, and it's something that's near and dear, obviously, to the sales and marketing. So I think every major incumbent has to be AI forward. A lot of them will, just knowing how big companies are, a lot of them will acquire their way into it at some point in time. But I think that the race is still starting. It's still early. And I think, like I said, in the sales and marketing space, I think it's going to take the next 3 years. It's an impact event, but it'll take 3 years for the dust to settle.
100% right. I think that's right. And that's not hype. That's just like a pragmatic view of, hey, that's how long it takes for people to really understand and implement these technologies. In this acquisition vein, let's keep going here. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about Google and HubSpot coming together. And that's a really interesting play to me because I don't really think of Google as a CRM player or even in that ABM mode. They do have touches with individual brands, but most of it's through advertising, right? And the platforms. So I thought this was really kind of interesting because HubSpot's the last player, right? They're the last major independent on that side coming finally into somebody's house. And why Google of all brands, right? HubSpot was dabbling with AI. I wouldn't say well. I really wasn't a huge fan of what they were doing, but they were doing something. Where do you see this kind of playing out?
Well, I think it's less of an AI play. It's much more of a business market play, if you would. Google on the application side tends to do well with startups and smaller companies. We use Google Apps. Many small companies do, right? And HubSpot is sort of, I know they've gone up market since, but that's where their bread and butter has been, which is with the smaller companies. It's usually the first CRM you implement. And by the way, they've done such a great job with that CRM in terms of just market adoption. When I was still at Triblio, I could tell more and more of our customers or more prospects that we were talking to, we'd ask them, what CRM did you use? And you could just see more and more of them were saying HubSpot. So I think it meshes well with that small business, small company where I think Google sees they have all the productivity, general productivity tools, but HubSpot provides the CRM and the marketing automation. And so they want to own the application suite on the low end of the market is kind of how I think of it.
Sure. That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So it's not an AI play.
I don't think it's primarily an AI play personally,
Right.
but maybe I'm wrong. Who knows what they're talking about? But
I have a no-brainer for this one, though, since we're on the no-brainer podcast. I guarantee you that they're going to move off of GPT to Gemini.
yeah, that you can be assured of, yes.
Boy, that's why I went to Georgetown right there. So back to another comment you made about ML and all the data and the generative AI. How do you see ML playing out? I mean, do you see it taking more and more of a backseat as generative, let's be more specific, as LLM models get stronger and more analytical and better able to process different diverse types of data? Do you see ML taking a backseat?
No, I don't. I just see a lot of the machine learning, reinforcement learning methods that have been sort of used. It will continue to be used. I think we're all a little bit enamored right now with generative AI because of it's a new kind of AI where, I think that's why ChatGPT got so much hype is that it opened our eyes to, I think its ability to handle language it helped. I think the thing about generative AI that's different is it can really sort of replicate human function in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. With the reinforcement learning and ML, it did some of that as well, but in a very narrow band of human function, which is all about analysis, right? Mm-hmm. This is a much broader band of human function. It's conversation, it's some broad level evidence-based reasoning. It's got a lot of different, much broader in terms of replacing what humans do, at least in a lot of white collar jobs. So yeah, I think to answer your question with ML, reinforcement learning, a lot of these, I think it'll still be there. It's kind of like we've been using it and developing it, and it's in a lot of applications. Even at Triblio, we used it. It will continue to be part of the AI stack, if you would, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, when I think back to the CDP, and everybody talks about personalization with generative AI, right? Like, this is the key to personalization. And I think from a technological standpoint, or at least from an AI model standpoint, it's possible as part of a complex AI model with generative on the end side of it. But you really need CDPs and really strong ML to get down to that personalization side of it and really allow basically the brand owner to have that ability to create the framework and to really dictate to the generative AI, these are the different pieces that you need for these different roles and models, and almost get it really tightly controlled. So when generative does do its part, it's done so in a manner that doesn't produce something that's a little bit, shall we say, off base.
Yeah.
I just feel like that there's more of a complex nature to it. And I feel like maybe this is a different conversation, but it does feel to me like it's either A or B, and people really aren't thinking of these things working together as parts of larger models, more complex solutions, if you would.
Yeah, I think you're right. The one thing I do want to pick up on with personalization, and I don't know if we still have time for this, but I may have to come back to talk about this, but I'm going to drop a bomb here and then you can close up the show or whatever. But here's the bomb that I want to drop. I think we have to reassess what true personalization means. Is it meaning, hey, Geoff, you went to Georgetown, my cousin went to Georgetown, and so that's great personalization. Is that what it means? Right, in the context of marketing and selling. Because I've used this phrase, so for whatever reason, I am like fully inspired to come up with these phrases, but especially when it comes to AI. But I think that generative AI has a deflationary effect on personalization. That's the bomb I want to drop. It has a deflationary effect on personalization, meaning it
raises the bottom.
It devalues personalization.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is I don't think it's enough just to have random personalization. I think personalization has to be meaningful, right? It has to be. And so a lot of times what we do at Tiga is we don't focus on we can personalize at a very deep level, what people call hyper personalization. We can do that. But that's just a tool. At the end of the day, I think it's about the research and discovery of buyer signals that make the personalization relevant. Right. So if it's just personalization on its own, sort of like what I call random acts of personalization, that's deflationary. AI has made it.
The kind that you and I get on Instagram.
Exactly. So anyway, that's the thing. And maybe another time we can unpack that or whatever. But
well, I think we got a few minutes. Let me pick it up a little bit. I think you're spot on with that, right? Because really what we're getting is a single point of context, maybe two. Like you're a guy that went to Georgetown. Here's a male T from Fanatics. Don't you want it, Geoff?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And that's problematic. But the other thing that this whole conversation fails to appreciate, I think we sometimes, as a profession, devalue the intelligence of humans, right? And what always happens with marketing is there's a cute marketing trick that works for a little while, and then the buyer gets wise to it. And I think you're right when you say that it's going to devalue personalization, or what I like to call raise the bottom, but it's still the bottom. The bottom is the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Now what was good marketing is now crap. Yeah. And as a result of that, people are going to get wise to that. They're going to basically turn it out and tune it out and avoid it. And so I think you really nailed it on the head there. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I just see that as being like the thing, and I haven't actually written a post on it, so everyone's hearing it for the first time here. But
be sure to clip that one for you, Andre.
But I just think the reality, and I think then, and by the way, what you said, which is we often devalue what humans do. I think there's a temptation to do that. And actually at Tiga, I think our point of view is different. We want to amplify the human seller. So there are things humans do that are uniquely human and very important. And how to think strategically about an account, how to approach, how to make that relational connection. What we want to do is just help you do that more effectively at better scale.
That's awesome. All right, let's wrap this bad boy. Andre, where can people find you?
Yeah, so first of all, on LinkedIn, I have an unusual name, so it's not going to be too hard to find me on LinkedIn. And I wish I was posting more often, but I'm so busy building a business. I post every 2 or 3 weeks. I usually try to make it worth your while, so something meaningful that really resonates with my own. I'm not a person that just posts for the heck of it. But the other thing is visit tiga.ai, www.tiga.ai. And if you want to see a demo, we're always happy to show you what Tiga is all about. So.
That's awesome. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Andre Yee, founder and CEO of Tiga AI. And for everybody that's listening, again, please do punch that like button, subscribe, leave a comment, share it with your buddies. We really appreciate you coming on board. And with that, we are out of here.
Thanks, Geoff. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Andre.